Welcome back to our show, The Leading Force. We have with us Ravi Batra. Ravi, as modest as you are in your profession, and if you look at most of the large law firms of your kind and your reputation have their offices in uptown, very spanky, nice, colorful, and you chose to do it in the Midtown Little India district, your classic Ravi Batra building. Why did you do that? Because you get all the illustrious people, a huge type of people coming to your office.
Frankly, I have to tell you, the last time I had a plan, I was 12 years old, and that was to become a lawyer. I've never had a plan since. So I can tell you that, I have never lost a plan because I didn't have a plan. So getting the townhouse, where we got it, was also fortuitous. We could easily have gotten it around the corner or the old Virgin Atlantic building in the village, which was also under consideration at the time, back in '88. But anyway, it's there, and it's a nice townhouse, and it serves us well.
It's a very classic building.
Yeah, it serves us well. We're right next to yeshiva dorms, and it used to be when we moved in, it was a Salvation Army, and then the yeshiva bought it, so now it's a dorm for the kids there. So we're in a great neighborhood.
The reason I bring up is that what it proves is that you don't need the building, you need the people inside the building, and I'm surely you have a great staff there. So I would imagine that you agree with what my position, my understanding
One
is.
of my, the senior lawyers that I have with me, they're all lawyers that I have fought in court with. I won't tell you who won because otherwise I'd be working for them.
They chose to be on your side, then to be on the other side.
But one of them is Mike Kennedy, who used to be, ran his own practice as a defense lawyer with 20 plus lawyers. And the ebb and flow of the practice of law is subject to economic conditions in a normal sense. My practice is not normal, so I'm unaffected, and always have been. Todd Sherman, who's my number two, was in the Rackets Bureau of Rob Johnson, the DA of the Bronx, and and he was on the team that prosecuted Bernie Kerik, Rudy Giuliani's police commissioner. So the first conviction that was done of Bernie was on the team player of that was Todd Sherman, who now works for me, he's my number two. So, I will tell you, it's an interesting footnote, but I would think that, if you were to ask me what's my favorite movie, I would have to say The Magnificent Seven, because they were all very, very sharp gunslingers, but they were able to work together as a team. And they used their power of gunslinging to do good, not evil. Okay?
Which is positive.
And, aside from my, my daughter and my parents and my family and the people who I'm blessed to be loved by and who I love back, and believe me, there's quite a few, from personal to intimate. It's nothing quite puts it together for you than for me to tell you that my favorite song in the world, that's very personal to me, is Frank Sinatra's rendition of Paul Anka's song My Way. So I take life at my terms because I'm willing to pay the price of playing at my terms.
Which is true in your case, but when you look at the continued growth and the progress, it seems that you have mentors. You have Senator John Thompson, who is continuously behind you. You have DA
John Sampson.
John Sampson.
Yes.
And
the Senate leader.
Then you have people like Brian Cobb. Then you have people like Bob Morgenthau.
Well, Bob Morgenthau, I have to tell you, in terms of the world governance, law and order, right and wrong, he is that diamond needle that draws the line in the sand between right and wrong. So if you want to see a person personify the very best of humanity, it's Bob Morgenthau. And I'm telling you, other than being blessed by my parents, he leads the pack of my personal mentors.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
So they are sort of mentors
Absolutely.
for you.
Mentor
doesn't mean they are kind of taking you forward somewhere, but they are emotionally, psychologically, mentally inspiring you.
No, they inspire me both by their own deeds,
True.
but they inspire me by their closeness to me and in my life. And Gary Ackerman, who's a senior member of Congress, a great supporter of Israel, contrary to some crazy people who think he's not, but he is a great supporter of Israel, and frankly, almost sage-like wisdom, because he has a great sense of history. I inherited him because he was my father's friend. He knows me since I was 12 or 13. Wow. So we're friends for 40 plus years, 44 years, so whatever the math is. Elliot Engels, another dear friend, who took over from Mario Biaggi when Mario was convicted and or charged with red tech. And, so Judge Stephen G. Crane, who used to be an appellate division judge and was the head of Manhattan Supreme, he resigned from the bench because the people of the state of New York have not risen up in arms yet to demand of Albany that our judges get paid a living wage. Do you know a Supreme Court judge or any other judge has not had an increase since 1999? It's gone through the Court of Appeals. It's been now declared legally that that's a constitutional violation. And yet, Albany can't get its act together to, out of a $110 billion budget or whatever the number is, I'm in the neighborhood, they can't find, a few $100 million to give people a living wage. Is it okay for example, Bud Goodman, as a sitting Supreme Court judge, would go sell hot dogs in Yankee Stadium on the weekends wearing a baseball cap so nobody knew him, just so he could pay his kids' tuition? It's not okay. There's something wrong with this. We get, there's an old saying, you reap what you sow.
Yes.
And so what's the message society is giving is, unless you have rich people, only rich people who already have the money, and then want to go and get the power as well, they can serve in public service. Regular people cannot. Now, that's a horrible result for American democracy, if that's where we're going. And I hope we're not. If there's one thing that comes out from your viewers is, I hope they call their assembly person, they call their senator, and they write to Governor Cuomo and say, give the judges a raise. Okay? Our prosecutors, who make sure that we're safe when we're walking, they can't get a raise because this whole system, the legal system, it's pegged to the judges. So, how can you have great prosecutors who can't pay their rent? They can't pay for their kids' education. What are we doing? What's the message? Now, compare that to Japan, for example, where in the case of teachers, here we don't pay leaving aside fraud, waste, and abuse in that whole system, but good teachers don't get paid enough, and bad teachers get overpaid. Whereas in Japan, a teacher is the highest paid individual in society. Yeah, because they understand they want the Einsteins in the classroom so they can clone them.
Yep.
It's a bargain to clone genius.
Agreed.
Okay? We want genius to be on the bench. We don't want people who have become monks and end up taking an involuntary vow of poverty to become a judge. That's not right, because not many can do it. And anyone for whom it is a promotion in salary, in rank, I understand, but anyone who gets to the bench where they're making more money by being on the bench, we as a society, we should run for the hills, because that's a really bad sign when a person who's getting to the bench is getting a promotion in salary. Okay? Because we're not getting somebody right.
It's a little sad state of affairs. But now, Ravi, you have been recently appointed as the commissioner, the first Indian to be on this prestigious panel that has been created called J-COPE by obviously the governor. And it's a huge responsibility. You're continuously into conflicts because you're overseeing a lot. Tell us, how do you plan to handle this? And tell us, first of all, more about the J-COPE and your role.
Well, let me just say this to you. J-COPE, as it's fondly known, is the Joint Commission on Public Ethics.
Right.
It is a noble experiment, unique to American jurisprudence.
And it's nowhere any other state?
No other state has this, what we've got.
So far.
Because every kid knows that America's checks and balances, separation of powers. Well, J-COPE straddles the separation of powers divide line. So it's a unique experiment in governance without violating the constitutional checks and balances. So it's a very carefully drafted piece of legislation. There are components in this because there are 14 commissioners. 6 of them are appointed by the governor. They're the governor's choice. Only 3 from his party. 3 have to be from the opposing party. Okay? So it's bipartisan kind of thing. And of course, the chair is appointed by the governor. And we're lucky to have a sitting DA, Janet DeFiore, Westchester DA, who's done a phenomenal job in Westchester.
Respectful man.
So, and it sends the right signal to society that, we got a sitting DA. All right. But the 8 other members of the commission, and I'm one of them, and I was appointed by the Senate Democrats, we're unique, all 8 of us, because we're the guardian to protect that the separation of powers regime is not violated. So the 8 of us are given statutory authority greater than the 6 gubernatorial appointees, because any 2 of us can exercise a legislative veto. So it's sort of like the P5 of the Security Council. The 8 legislative members have something like the P5 power of the Security Council, and it's to keep the separation of powers intact.
Correct.
Now, I will tell you that I'm absolutely honored and delighted and humbled to the extent, I will tell you, that I reached out to my very dear friend Rabbi Waldman, who's my Talmudic scholar, who, every now and then I call him, sometimes more often than not. And I certainly bugged the hell out of him in the last few weeks, because upon being appointed, I wanted him to detox my soul a little bit, because when you sit in judgment on your fellow man, see, as an advocate, it's as an advocate, my life's very easy. It's very easy. Because I see the case that I see, and I give it all my strength to do it. And then it's the judge and the jury who will decide. But here I'm sitting in judgment, and it requires my soul to be unbiased and to rule without fear or favor. In the noblest tradition of Bob Morgenthau. His mandate to me is fly straight.
Right.
When Cy Vance was elected as his successor, Bob Morgenthau was asked, and I was at the press conference right next to Bob, and he was asked, and he says, my advice, fly straight. If you do the right thing for the right reasons, you can't get in trouble, okay? And so I intend to do that. But, I tell you an interesting footnote. JCOBE is very important to New York State governance, because we have had a horrible failed experiment with its predecessor, the Public Integrity Commission. That's the commission where Eliot Spitzer and his people were being investigated.
Correct.
By the PIC, Public Integrity Commission. And the commission itself was leaking information to the target. Now, there's nothing more corrupt. If a judge goes bad, might as well close up the courthouse.
That's
okay?
Right.
So if an ethics commission doesn't have ethics, close it up. There's no point. So when that had occurred and there was an investigation launched by the New York State Inspector General's Office of Public Integrity Commission, at the night of President Obama's inauguration, I and my family were in Washington, and we were at one of the inaugural balls, the Mid-Atlantic Ball. And at that time, the new governor of the state of New York was David Paterson. And I've known David for many years, going back maybe 25 or so years, when he was a regular senator before he rose, because he is blue blood in politics. His father's a distinguished, a public servant of society. And so David and I had a conversation in the inaugural ball, where I was going to be considered as chairman for Public Integrity Commission back in 2009, beginning of 2009, because John Feerick had just resigned a week or 10 days prior. And it was just not a conversation. Then there were follow-up meetings that I was vetted by the Appointments Council of the governor and cleared by them. And there were subsequent, appointments that I've had, and I was cleared by, vetted by the state police,
look at your
whatever.
resume, look at the,
So even last year, Governor Patterson said to me in December of 10 that, because he was sitting with a recommendation to appoint me then as a member to pick. And he says, I'd love to appoint you. I considered you for chair. I'd certainly love to appoint you. But at that time, Governor Andrew Cuomo had been elected, so he was governor-elect.
So
and he says Governor Cuomo is going to be changing pick and creating something very unique. So I tell you, Jay Cope, the credit for Jay Cope goes to Governor Cuomo, Speaker Shelley Silver, Minority Leader Brian Kolb, Leader Sampson, and Leader Skelos. But ultimately, it's not whether I'm honored to be on it or not. Ultimately, it's whether New Yorkers feel honored that there is Jay Cope to make sure that Albany and the state of New York is honest, and that we squeeze out fraud, waste, and abuse out of government.
It's a lot of work, Ravi, for next 5 years when you are in such a hot seat as a commissioner of this experiment, the first experiment in the United States of America. But we compliment you as a proud son, as a proud father, honestly a very community-friendly person where you do your things very quietly, whether it's a Krutika's case, whether it is Ambassador Prabhu Dayal's case, or you do things for the Prime Minister of India, or declaring, making a statement from New York State, Albany. You do those things very quietly, but I think you are certainly a proud husband also, because Ranju Batra plays a big role in your life.
Thank you for all of that, but I just want to correct the record. I am not a political polygamist, and
absolutely
and I will tell you that while I owe a debt of honor to India because it's a country of my birth, there's no question in my mind that my default programming is entirely Jeffersonian, and it is dedicated to the United States. And when you talk about things that I may have done that may have helped India, I'm happy to do it, but I'm much more involved and happy to be assisting the United States regain the respect it deserves, because we are truly an exceptional nation in the history of humanity, and we've kind of lost our way over the last few. I mean, greed has run amok. Wall Street needs to remember it exists for the benefit of Main Street, not the other way around.
True. Very well said, Ravi. Very, very well said. I really appreciate. Thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure, pal. Happy New Year.
You too. And we have been fortunate to have with us Ravi Batra, and you heard him firsthand, as passionately, as strongly, as clearly, as directly as he speaks in the court of law when he takes on the people who don't stand in front of the right side of the law, I should say it. And now he's on Jay Cope. New Yorkers will be watching and before they do something wrong, and then Washington DC will take it up for other parts of the country, the other 51 states. An experiment that should succeed with people like Ravi Batra. Once again, very proud of him from Indian side as well as American side. We had with us Ravi Batra, very successful lawyer, on our show, The Leading Force. See you next year. Have a great...
Need your prayers.
You'll be always in our prayers.
Thank you.
You all have a great new year and have a great weekend. This is Sunil Hali signing off on The Leading Force. Thank you.